Hey everybody again, Pastor Kevin Swann, and we are excited as we go through this series, I Am a Church Member, small but powerful book written by Pastor Tom Rainer. This is session 6 of our series that we've been doing, and we're in chapter 5 today. I will lead my family to be a healthy church member. And it does take all of us together collectively to encourage and to support each other in our families, that we can really be all that God wants us to be. So let's go ahead now and get started. Read the chapter and download the Bible study sheet, and we're ready with chapter 5. I will lead my family to be a healthy church member.
And let's get started with part 6 of this series, I Am a Church Member. We want to make sure that we understand the goals of our series. I'm a big believer in making sure that we get things accomplished as we go along. And there are 3 items that we want to make sure we cover through this series, and each lesson hopefully will hit one of these 3 points. And first is to critically examine what it means to be a church member, not from our perspective, but from God's point of view. This is so important to understand because many people join church from their point of view, not God's, and that's where a lot of the disconnect occurs. Number 2, to generate ideas that will help all church members become more engaged in the life of the church. And this is something that every pastor struggles with, how to get more people involved and participating, not just the faithful few, but as many as possible. And then last, to facilitate discussion on barriers to effective church ministry. There are things that simply prevent us from doing ministry in an effective way. Last time, in the last video, we did chapter 4, which is I will pray for my church leaders. I hope that if you watch that video, you are praying for your church leader. If you are an Ivy member, I do hope you're praying for me as your pastor. And I hope that people are praying for all pastors in general, because pastors really need the prayers and support. And I know a lot of times people can look at the news and they can see all kinds of things. And contrary to popular belief, being a pastor, while it is wonderful, it is also very stressful, at times lonely, and extremely difficult to do. And we must understand that while you look at different TV shows, whether it's Preachers of LA or just any other thing that you might see on TV, or you look at in a service what the pastor might be driving or where they might be dressed a certain way, most people think that the pastor is living a great life, but that's really not necessarily the case. There are a lot of pastors who are doing things the right way, doing things in a loving way, and still are struggling. And so to do it well, you really must be called to this. And anybody that does this for monetary gain only is out of their mind. There's just too many things to have to deal with, and the life experiences, and just going before the Lord for the people, and just many different things. It just doesn't make sense. And I shared this in the last video, but I will do it again here. 97, this was a survey that was taken of various pastors, and this is what came out of it. 97% of pastors have been betrayed, falsely accused, or hurt. I'm not going to go through the entire list, but 1,500 pastors quit the ministry every single month, according to this survey. 1,500 are fed up, don't want to see ministry, just done with ministry. And it's not only just the pastor, but it's the pastor's family. 94% of pastors' families feel the pressure of ministry. It's just all of these things that are combined that really make it difficult for ministries. And so today we're going to go into chapter 5, which will be I will lead my family to be healthy church members. And we normally do a discussion question. I want you to pause the video, take some time to really think about this question. Do you believe that Christians in general have better relationships with other church members or with people, quote unquote, outside of the church? And I want you to think about that question and then explain your answer. Let's pause the video now. If somebody's watching the video with you, certainly have discussion with them. And this is a very interesting question, and one that you should give some thought to. So let's pause the video and then we'll move forward. It is my understanding that many people who come to church come guarded. And as a result of coming guarded, it makes you not want to share. And if you don't share, then how can you have a deep relationship with somebody if you're not willing to share, for fear of being judged or fear of your business being put out there? But that's exactly what happens. And so in chapter 5, we do see some of the summary points that many Christians go to church. That's what we do. But unfortunately, many people don't have a true love for their church, which is something that is completely different. Oftentimes, church members tend to talk more about what the church is doing wrong. And keep in mind that when we say love for the church, it really is love for the people. You don't love the building, you love the people. And unfortunately, people go to church but don't have a true love for the people in the church. And because there's not a genuine love in the church, that's what makes church experience not as healthy as it needs to be. Therefore, many people have the wrong expectation of what church is supposed to be about. And you go with a certain expectation, and then when you feel that the expectation hasn't been met, now you have a different view of the church altogether. And this is especially important in what we call the new member church cycle. In every church, there's something called backdoor revival. And if you don't know that term, backdoor revival simply means that you have people who join the church for whatever reasons. They're on fire for the Lord. And then at some point, you don't see them again. They fall off the scene. And so just as soon as they have joined the church, many also walk away from the church. And you have to ask yourself, why? Well, there's a cycle that takes place. And usually the cycle is, for new members, there are people who come and see what the church has to offer. They listen to the preacher, they listen to the music, they look at the ministries, and they see and they kind of scan what the church has to offer. And then based on that, they become excited about the church and being a part of it. So they move from seeing what it's all about to now saying, wow, you know, I can be a part of this. I can see myself doing A, B, and C. And then they want to become more involved in the life of the church. They join the church. They go through new members. They've gone through all of the process. They're still excited about the church. They're on fire. They're at every Bible study. They're at every church service. They're wanting to be involved in ministries, and they are on fire. But then something happens. And what happens is that now the more involved people become, now they start seeing the imperfections of the church and the people in it, from the top all the way down. So they start seeing the imperfections of the leadership and other members. And maybe they thought in their mind that the leadership and members should be further along than when they really are. And then they start to realize, man, you know what? They're not as far off as I thought, not as spiritual as I thought, not as quote unquote perfect as I thought. And now they become disillusioned by what they see. And now after becoming discouraged by what they see, ultimately they leave the church and go elsewhere. And it is here that we need to come to the realizations of some things about church. And this is why many expectations of people go wrong, because you have an unfair expectation of the church. And the reality is that the more you go to church, the more you're going to see the shortcomings of people. The church isn't a place for perfect people, although people try to pretend like they're perfect. And the only reason why they pretend to want to be perfect is out of fear that they will be judged. So in order to not be judged, I want to give you the impression that I'm further along than I am, but really I'm not. And when I see those imperfections, now it throws me off. And this is what causes the church to not be healthy, because we have these fronts and things. The reality is the church is a place of imperfect people who should be striving for spiritual growth. But the reality is that many people in church are not striving for spiritual growth. Many people in church don't want to grow at all. Many people in church are satisfied with where their life is, and they don't want to change, because change for many people is fearful. And so while you should have people in the church that should be dedicated to growing in the things of God, unfortunately, you do have a large group of people in the church who are content and satisfied, who have no desire to want to grow, and who are perfectly comfortable, unfortunately, talking about other people in the church. Number 3, the church is in many ways a reflection of the culture and society of which we live. And this is something that we need to understand. If the church is doing its part in reaching to the lost and going out into the society, then that means you're going to see in your church a reflection of who's in your society. So if you got single parent families in your society, who do you think is going to come to the church? And to make it further, with now the proliferation of gays and gay marriage, what do you think is going to be coming to the church? So the church in many ways is a reflection of the culture and society in which we live. The strength of any church then lies in what church members are doing outside of the church, not inside of the church. And this is very, very important to understand. The strength of the church lies in what we do at home, how we talk about the church at home. And again, church is the people, not the building. So what are we doing away from the church? How are we talking about the church away from the church? Because if we go to this church and we celebrate with the people and then we leave, and then all of a sudden we go home and we talk about these same people, what do our kids think of church now? What do the unsaved think about church now? Maybe they think, well, there's no need for me to go. If you going and then you come back and talking about the people in it. The strength of any community, the strength of any church, the strength of any school lies in the strength of families. And this is so critical to understand. So critical to understand. So let's continue on. How can each of us individually help our churches to be stronger and healthier? Number one, we need to learn how to pray for people instead of talking about people. This is so important. Number two, be mindful of your own shortcomings and sinful areas. The chapter talks about the beam versus the speck. While you're worried about the speck in somebody else's eye, you got a whole beam in yours. And this would help people bring their guard down, and you would be mindful of your own shortcomings instead of talking about others. Number three, greater consistency at home. And this is something that we don't always talk about. But there is people tend to compartmentalize their life. So I go to church, I go to work, and I go home. And in each of those places, you act differently. So I act differently at home where I can let my guard down. I act a certain way at church or at work because I need to act professional. And then I act a certain way at church because I want to give off this image. But if there was greater consistency in your home life as it is your church life, the church would automatically be healthier. Having a serving spirit in your physical family as well as your church family, because church should be the place, at least as I see it, where if you don't get what you need in your physical family, then you have a church family that can help you out. And then finally, taking the risk, as chapter 5 talks about. A man named Bob took the risk of taking the author of the book, Tom, under his wing and helping him and encouraging him and sharing with him. The same ought to be true in our churches. When was the last time you took somebody under your wing to show them the things of God, to show them how to love the church? You should love your church family, even as your own family, because, again, church ought to be the place where you don't get everything you get in your physical family. That's the importance of a healthy church. Also, you can summarize all of these things that I just mentioned under one category. And that simply is churches, in order to be healthy, need a greater demonstration of unconditional love and support for their family and church family members. I guarantee you, if people came to church and felt like they would be loved and not judged and valued instead of talked about, church would be a completely different experience. And so the discussion that I want you to do now is I want you to turn in your Bible to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. I want you to read verses 1 through 7. And I want you to discuss what you see as in terms of qualifications and qualities of love that are needed for families and churches. Now, keep in mind, 1 Corinthians 13, if you're not familiar, is commonly known as the love chapter. It is the greatest form of love that exists in chapter 13. Paul goes on to say in verse 4, love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it's not boastful. I guarantee you that if more marriages and more families and more church families had patience and kindness and no envy and competition in their versions of love, families would be better, marriages would be better, and churches would definitely be better. And so what it seems to me then is that people go to church and they share a space, but they don't really have any type of genuine love connection that God would be pleased with. And it is this reason why churches are not as healthy as they need to be. Go back and read 1 Corinthians 13, verses 1 to 7. And if you read it carefully, what you will find is that the same qualities that are needed in families, the same qualities that are needed in marriage, are the same qualities that are needed in a church family. What church wouldn't be better if the members had more patience with each other? What church wouldn't be better if the members weren't more kind to each other? What church wouldn't be better if the love in the church wasn't envious, where people weren't jealous over somebody else's gift, or somebody sang a solo and somebody didn't get to sing the solo, or somebody preaches better, or somebody prays better, or somebody dresses better? All that is nonsense. When you have genuine love, it makes the church experience so much better. And when you teach your family members how to love like this, have a love for the church, how to have a love for the people, it makes the church experience so much better. I tell you what, I am enjoying this chapter 5 because it really unveils some of the hidden nuggets that we need in order to be a blessing. So I want to give you some homework, and your homework is this. I want you to pray for your church family this week. If you can, in your household, gather your family and together pray for your church family. Don't talk about them. Don't look for the flaws in them, but teach your family how to love the church. We are to love the church, the imperfect people that attend the church, because we're imperfect. And so we are to love the imperfections of the people and have patience with them and show them the way and help them to see the things of God, and not just talk about them when they don't do right, but celebrate them when they are doing the right things. And so in doing so, when we have prayer time at home, and we show our children at home, and even our unsaved people in our houses, the value of praying for and showing love for our church family, we then teach others how to love the church and the people in the church. And when that happens, when there's a greater love for the church, there's a greater willingness to serve in the church in spite of what we may see. So in spite of what I see, I still serve. I still love. I know that person isn't doing right. I know that person isn't where they need to be, but it doesn't stop me from serving, because God has called me to love and to serve those in my family and those in my church. All right, chapter 5 pledge, page number 64. Let's read it together. I will lead my family to be good members of this church as well. We will pray together for our church. We will worship together in our church. We will serve together in our church. And we will ask Christ to help us fall deeper in love with this church, because he gave his life for her. If you believe that and pledge to do that, sign your page in your book. If you don't have a book, sign the top of the page. And we hope that you will do that and enjoy, and have enjoyed rather, this Bible study session. Listen, church can be a whole lot better when we stop being guarded. What helps us to not be guarded is for all of us to come to the realization that we're imperfect people. So if we have that notion from the very beginning, I'm not perfect, you're not perfect, we all have issues, we all have challenges, we're all trying to get better, but we love each other through our imperfections, church would be a completely different experience. So please take the time, take somebody under your wing, pray for the church family. Learn how to fall in love with the church, and not just Christ, but learn how to fall in love with the church, because again, the church are the people and not just the building. We hope you've enjoyed today's Bible study. And next week, we finish up this Bible study series on I Will Treasure Church Membership as a Gift. Small little book, but this book is powerful and has a lot of great information, and I hope that you've enjoyed it so far. Thank you for tuning in, and be blessed and be a blessing to someone else.
You know, oftentimes we rely on church leaders, pastors, other people. But the truth of the matter is, the greatest influence and impact of somebody really knowing about God is in our homes. And when our families take more of the responsibility of leading other family members to Christ, because what happens at home is the greatest place of influence and power over anyone's life, and that you don't compartmentalize. I go to church, but then I do things at home that are different from what we do at church. It makes all the difference in the world. We hope you enjoyed today's Bible study. We just have one more chapter in the book, and I hope that you've been enjoying this series. Until next time, be blessed and be a blessing to someone else. Take care.